Welcome to episode 515 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and he's Rafa Aldamuy. And today, we're to continue reviewing the 1-0 win over Porto. How's that sound, Rafa?
Let's go ahead. I have a few things to say, so I'm pretty excited for this episode.
All right. So before we do, however, unfortunately, this is the aftermath of it. If you really want, some even the pictures of stuff that happened in the game, I had the 5 headlines last night or yesterday, and depending on when this comes out. So on Wednesday night, Thursday morning, that's when the 5 headlines came out. But before we get into the details of the actual game, again, the unfortunate big news since yesterday is an update on the Lewandowski injury. So it's 3 to 4 weeks out with a sprained left ankle after the tackle by David Carmo yesterday. And it's a tough one because there are bad things of this that we're going to get into. There are good things. And by good things, I mean like silver linings here, as in the press could get better and a lot better with Torres leading the line. But João Felix isn't necessarily the perfect presser either. So I find it ironic that he played under Diego Simeone for a few years and he's not really up to speed when it comes to the pressing game that Xavi's asking for. But neither is Lamine Yamal, as I mentioned on the 5 headlines yesterday. But that is something for Lamine Yamal, at least, that he may not only learn in time, but his body may be able to handle that better down the road. But right now, at the moment, it's a 16-year-old, it's João Felix, and it's Ferran Torres up top. So the bad, obviously, for Lewandowski is you lose your number 9, you lose your leading goal scorer. And the thing about Lewandowski is not only was he just, people were frustrated at the way he was this year, up and down, but he has 6 goals this year, leading both categories for Barcelona, as well as leading assists with 3 assists. Torres has 4 goals. Felix has 3, Gabi has 2, Cancelo has 2, Rafinha has 2, Koundé has 1, Fermin Lopez has 1, De Jong has 1, and Pedri has 1. So Barca against Granada on Sunday will have 13 of their 23 goals that they have scored this season active in that game. So I don't know if it doesn't work that way. I know it doesn't work that way, but that's what Barca had to deal with. And I think obviously prediction time, it'll be João Felix, Ferran Torres, Lamine Yamal, or Fermin Lopez actually in the attack for Granada. Then Barca don't play again until the 22nd against Athletic Club, and Rafinha might be back for that one. So I don't know. The silver lining also is that Barca have to get one more game on Sunday, and then not to say it's a little bit of a rest. A lot of players will go for international duty, but in theory, that's just time without matches to give the walking injured, to get healed.
No, I agree, and I don't know if we're cursed or not, but it seems like it's the same thing around the same time that happened last year. Obviously, last year it was basically our entire defense that went down during the most important part of the group stage of the Champions League. And then we also played El Clásico with Eric, with Sergi Roberto and whatnot. But right now, it seems like we're losing players by the game. Like we lost Frankie. I don't remember if that was against Celta or Mallorca. Then we lost Rafinha in the next game. Now we lose Lewandowski in this one against Porto. So I agree. You're like, oh, thank God that the FIFA break is around the corner. But at the same time, I mean, knock on wood. It's not like we have no international players. Like basically all of our team is going to go on international duty as well, especially the South American World Cup qualifiers, which we know how hard they are. And I'm not like, we just escaped the game against Granada. It's like, even if we manage to get those 3 points, which hopefully we were able to do that, then we still got to be on the lookout for the next 2 weeks during an international break, because sadly players can get injured during that time as well.
Well, it's Araujo, right? Because when you said South American, the only other South American left to go on international duty is Ronald Araujo.
Because Rafinha is currently injured.
Right, and he's not 100% either, that being Araujo. So, I mean, if I'm the Uruguayan coach, I'm just hoping that, Araujo, maybe I'll play him for 45 minutes. But he's supposed to get on the plane, go through the thing, go through training, and do all that stuff. And certainly, I think with all the other injuries, all the other lines, if anything, the back line is the only line that is healthy at the moment, because there's depth or lacking everywhere else. And I mentioned this too at the start of the season, really, when the Champions League roster was released. And I was saying how there are not many first team players. There are 21 total first team players that are registered with the first team playing in the Champions League on that roster. And that is not a big number. And so going through like who's going to be the next person, maybe we see on the bench or in the game against Granada, or Shakhtar Donetsk, particularly with Gabi suspended and if nobody's back in time for that one. So the candidates really quickly go down the list here. Anhar Alakan, UEFA Youth League goal off the bench yesterday. He had a big long run forward, looked really good. He is not match fit yet. He didn't even start that match, having just come back from an injury, and he still needs a few more weeks himself to kind of get up to speed at Barca Athletic and U19 level, let alone throwing him into the fire of the first team. Then there was Mark G, also had a goal yesterday. He is 17, 18 in November, but playing as a center forward is different than playing on the wings as a young player. So I have concerns about bringing a 17-year-old center forward up. He's been going between Barca Athletic and U19s this season as well, so not necessarily being thrown into the Barca Athletic fire right away either. And then the other two, Pau Victor and Diego Perkin, the two 21-year-old center forwards for Barca Athletic. Victor on loan from Girona and Perkin bought from Cultural Leonesa as a depth piece. Those are the other options for Barca Athletic. Victor has played as both the 9 and on the left wing next to Perkin and does lead Barca Athletic with 4 goals and an assist. So in a stopgap moment, it would be the 21-year-old Pau Victor, who is good form. Just put him on the bench just in case the last 5-10 minutes, see what happens here. And then in the Champions League, Anhar Alakan, Alex Garrido, and Mark Casado are the midfielders forwards available in the Champions League against Shakhtar Donetsk. If Fermin Lopez is starting with Gundogan and Oro Romeu, because remember, Gabi is suspended, then it's João Felix, Ferran Torres, and Lamine Yamal up top. Just has to be those 6. Like, that's it. Remembering that Gabi is suspended, then those are your options off the bench up top, as in Alakan Garrido, who played wing for just about 10 minutes in his debut last year, and then Casado as your midfielder. And I will also say, I'll throw in the wrinkle here, that but that Xavi will keep himself open to the idea of Balde on the left wing and Alonso behind him. Or yesterday late, it was actually Alonso at left wing and Balde at left back to close out the game. But starting with that scenario of Balde on the wing and Alonso behind him, that might be crazy enough for Laporta to come to Xavi's house and rip up his contract renewal, which I assume is how Spanish contracts work. And also to note, too, Garrido has been injured quite a bit in the last few months as well, and is just coming back from his own injury and is not yet 100%. And then Casado has been on the bench for 7 matches this year. But before you see Casado, you're going to see your favorite person, Rafa, in Sergio Roberto, because sorry, but the center backs are healthy, and one of them can deputize at right back while you put Roberto in the midfield. He is still 5th on that 3-man depth chart against Granada, though, with Gabi, Gundogan, Romeu, and Fermin Lopez. So we'll see Roberto probably, but I don't think Roberto even starts against Granada, because you have those 4 options for those 3 spots. But again, looking ahead to Shakhtar Donetsk at the end of the month, Sergio Roberto might start that game. I wouldn't see why he wouldn't start that game over Casado. I know, but it's just like, that's how far down the depth chart we're going, that you and I are about to argue about Sergio Roberto over Mark Casado. And there's like one person in the comments, by the way, on YouTube, who was really singing the praise of Mark Casado. And I was like, wow, I get a lot of Casado notes or comments today. And I was like, oh, it's the same user who said a bunch of things over and over about Casado. And he's fine, but I just think Xavi hasn't yet trusted him. And I think Xavi might be more inclined to trust even a younger player higher up the field before he trusts a midfielder, because midfielder is just so essential to what Xavi's trying to do here.
And this is exactly why I've always said that I don't want Sergi Roberto on the roster, because whether we like it or not, there's going to be a time where the stars align and he's going to have to play because he's there. And I'd rather see Fermin Lopez get minutes, Mark Casado get minutes. I'd rather see you get minutes in 2023 instead of Sergi Roberto. There's no purpose whatsoever of Sergi Roberto getting any type of minutes in 2023. And that was one of the reasons that I didn't even want him on the squad, because I knew there was going to be a time that this was going to happen. And on top of that, I don't want to get into the whole Sergi Roberto thing again. But I don't know, because I watched a little bit of Xavi's press conference before the Porto game. I think it was the one before, not the one after. Not 100% sure. But now that he's gone back to the 4-3-3, or at least the 4-3-3 with 3 actual forwards up top, because I got in an argument on my YouTube channel, people saying, well, Xavi said that he's always played 4-3-3. I'm like, you know what I mean. Like a typical 4-3-3 with the 3 front players being actual forwards, not one of them being Gavi, who's a midfielder, and then drops down, and that eventually becomes a 4-4-2. So with us in the last few games, honestly, like Celta, Mallorca, Sevilla, and Porto, we're getting trashed on the counterattack. it's been on and on and on and on. And it seems like everybody is creating so much danger against us on the counter. But now that we've gone back to the 4-3-3 with three forwards, that I'm beginning to question how long will Xavi manage to keep this formation with three forwards up top. And I think he has the urge to go back to that 4-4-2, be a little bit more compact in the midfield, because we're just getting, there's too much space in between the players, and we're getting hit on the counter. More, like, it's insane in Mallorca, Celta, Sevilla, and Porto, and it's a problem. And if we continue to play like this against Real Madrid and like top opposition, they're not going to waste the chances that those other four teams wasted. So I think that's another discussion for us to have, especially when the Xavi goes like, I'm done with this 4-3-3 with three forwards up top. F it. I'm going back to the 4-4-2. I can't do this like this.
Well, it's function against result, right? Like Barca's defense in the Champions League right now, again, for Antwerp, so how much you put into that, but they have not only kept 2 clean sheets, the only other team to do so has been AC Milan with 2 0-0 draws, but they have also conceded the least XG, even though Porto was on the front foot. Porto was the better team yesterday, and Barcelona were fortunate to get out of that one with a clean sheet and with the 3 points. But still, Barcelona have conceded the least XG, or then expected goals, among the 32 teams in the Champions League this season, 1.01 in 2 matches. And again, a big deal about that has to do with the fact that Royal Antwerp, no disrespect to them. Yeah, they put up 2 against Shakhtar Donetsk, but they could arguably be the weakest team in the entire Champions League this season, with especially again what they put it against Barcelona. But yeah, it's about that result against formations thing, because when you watch the game, and we saw the game, Koundé had that important tackle on Pepe, just a huge monster showing by Koundé. Araujo had the important tackle moments later. Balde had a huge defensive game that I spoke about in the 5 headlines yesterday. Really good from him. And then Cancelo was much more defensively sound yesterday in his positioning. It's interesting though, because people talk about his defense, and he's not actually a bad defender. Like, I can admit, Serginho Dest, not a great 1v1 defender. Like, regardless of what it is, like, not a great, like, doesn't really turn his hips well. Like, he makes his mistakes. And there are defenders that people said the same thing about Semedo too. Like, Semedo wasn't comfortable being pushed too far up ahead. So when he had to defend by running backwards on the back foot, Semedo wasn't a good defender in that situation. But if you allowed him to just be a defensive right back and try to stand up the opposition and deal with the wingers with his hips kind of forced to the sideline, Semedo was a fine defender. He just was so lacking offensively that he had to get a higher position up the field, which did leave him exposed, and he was kind of stuck in between all these different minds of not being very good at that position. But Cancelo, I don't think is actually that poor defensively, especially when he's sticking to his position, which is what he did yesterday, because that is almost never the case. So when we talk about him defensive, we talk about his function of stepping into the midfield, or like yesterday, having to provide width as well, because he's also being asked to be somewhere else on most occasions other than just being a defensive right back. And very quickly, you notice that by the 15th to 17th minute, the 2 things that happened was Cancelo, who even in the first 10 minutes I noticed was a bit wider. At that point, it was Lamine Yamal. I know you don't feel well. I know you're not feeling great, but stand out there on the right wing. We may not even hit you. We likely won't. I'm going to get that point in a second. And then Cancelo, you tuck in, and you're going to stay pretty devout to being just an actual defensive right back, because we're having an issue here. And then that channel in the middle between Romeu and Gundogan, again, by the 15th, 17th minute, that like completely closed up because they were way too spread out, as you mentioned. And the other question I actually want to ask you and retort in a second here is, should Gabi be the one dropping deeper instead? Because at this point, on paper, Gundogan should not be, how do I say this? Gundogan should be the one who's better at carrying the ball forward. But Gabi is the one that we've seen this season who is actually succeeding at carrying the ball forward. And if you're going to drop somebody in next to Romeu, it's got to be somebody who can vertically move the ball with the ball at his feet, unless Romeu or Gabi or Gundogan or somebody in that midfield is going to start spraying those long balls wide, because nothing is getting out to the wings. Really, it's not. Like, they're not switching play almost at all. So a build-up is slow. That means that they're cutting down those passing angles like they did the first 2 minutes of that game. Romeu dispossessed twice in 2 minutes because Porto were just sitting in the passing lanes. And that channel in particular, if you're going to start Araujo, which defensively you do because he's one of the best defenders in the world, but if you're going to start Araujo and Koundé instead of Christensen and Koundé, then that Romeu to Araujo little channel right there is going to be a problem because they want that movement. All teams, counterattack wise, want that movement because Romeo and Araujo are not going to be sending that ball out to the wings. Like, that's not going to happen. That means that a pass has to happen from Araujo to Romeo. Then Romeo is going to receive, and another short pass is coming. Same thing. If you're even going to shield off Romeo, then Araujo is the one who's going to have to make the movement forward in some way.
Well, I'll say especially about the defense against Porto. Obviously, Koundé was exceptional, just incredible. Araujo was really good too. I thought Balde was really good too, especially considering how he had to like literally go up, go down, go up, go down. Porto had a lot of movement on his during in his area, so he had to cover a lot of ground. And I would say, I think honestly, I wasn't so pleased with Cancelo's defensive game, especially. And I think teams are starting to target that side, especially that channel between Cancelo and whoever the right center back is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, against Porto, it was Araujo. And I think that it's complicated because we know how good he is offensively and how much is asked of him, whether it's, oh, you got to like tuck in to the midfield. No, you got to go wide and support Rafinha or Lamine Yamal. That more often than not, and during a few times during the last few games, that's the area that gets caught. It's Cancelo's back, and teams I think are starting to target that area. And I think that Porto did it quite a few times, especially they tried a few long balls on purpose for that channel, and the thing got non-penalty was also on that channel as well, and he was caught out because he has to do so many things. So I think Xavi has to figure out a way, especially by having two full left back and right back that attacks so much, because for the most part during the heyday we had Erika Vidal who would tuck in more, and then Dani Alves had to do whatever the hell you want on that right side. But now that we have, and then when Jordi Alba came in, it was a little bit of the opposite. It was Jordi Alba who just had a free role, and the right back would be a little bit more conservative. But now we have our left back and our right back they're so good offensively that I think we have to figure out, and by we I mean Xavi, a way to balance that a little bit, because we're getting caught, especially on Cancelo's side, in my opinion. And then I completely agree with the whole Romeo Araujo thing. But to me, one of the problems, and I was talking about this with my ex podcast partner Julio, is that I think we have a lot of players that excel near the base of the midfield. They like to start the play. They don't like to receive up high between defenders, because obviously that's the more complicated thing. You're receiving between the lines where literally you have to control the ball, have a great first touch, and then think quick, turn around, because you got 4, 5, 6 rivals near you. So it's easier to be near the defenders, because obviously Oriol Romeo is a defensive midfielder. So that he's going to be there. Frenkie de Jong, he loves dropping deep and picking the ball from deep and then just passing or dribbling and whatnot. Gavi, I think his best role is near the base as well. Gundogan, especially after those 10 horrible 15 minutes of Oriol Romeo, Gundogan had to drop deep and help out, because Romeo was a lone pivot in big games with teams pressuring us really high up. I think that's going to be a problem. So you have Romeo, you have Frenkie, you have Gavi, you have Gundogan. You got 4 midfielders that like to literally start the play. And I think that's going to become a problem down the road, because if you look at it, then who do we have that are able to get the ball in those tight spaces between defenders? Pedri's really injury prone. And that's Fermin, we're starting to see a little bit here and there. And then I think this is going to be the key. What is Xavi going to do with Joao Felix? Because right now he's playing as a left winger. And I think it's basically that Coutinho-esque role, where we know that Joao Felix's preferred role is behind a typical number 9 down the middle, and then he can free roam and do whatever he wants because he's really good. He's really good technically, but he's not a typical speedy winger. He's not Vinicius. He's not Nico Williams. So when he gets the ball literally on the wing near the sideline, he's not going to go by anybody purely on speed. Like the right back usually catches up with him. So but what I'm trying to get at real quick before I end this is that he's the other guy alongside Pedri who is able to receive the ball in really tight spaces because he's so good technically, turn around, have a quick pass, 1-2, blah, this and that. So what is Xavi going to do eventually with Joao Felix? Is he going to keep playing him on the left wing like he's a typical winger? Or if he's going to eventually put Joao Felix in a more central role to help out with that because he has so many midfielders that like their preferred role is not high up, is down near the defense. So it's just a lot of questions that I don't.
Yeah, I will push back a few things here. I think that Joao Felix, believe it or not, like whether or not his ceiling is worth his price tag and all those different conversations we can have later about him. As far as his function, I think in Xavi's system, I'm actually pretty happy with it. Like I think with Balde being the left winger that he is and having the speed that he does and being able to dribble inside the way he does, I mean, Felix, if anything, I mean, people argued, and I saw stuff about him being selfish or whatever yesterday, but I pushed back on that too. I think Felix has been just fine. I think Felix was rising to the moment, and I think he's been really deadly at that far post. I think he works really well, as you mentioned, off of number 9 and getting into those pockets, kind of playing off that shoulder inside the box. But when I think he's also good enough on the ball that he's helpful for buildup. I mean, I think he tries to every now and again tries to run the channels, very much like Rafinha is an undercredited thing that Rafinha does as well, trying to run those half spaces and come in behind. And I think, yeah, I'm actually fine with the way Joao Felix functions in the team. But yes, can he achieve? Can he score goals? Can he get assists? Like, because his whole price tag and everything and what he's costing is a star's ransom, right? So it's like, unless he's going to become a star or really look like a star, right now he looks like a piece of the puzzle. He looks like a cog in a machine that could win La Liga, certainly, and we'll see how far they go in the Champions League. And for the Balde thing too, yeah, I mean, it would be perfect, right, if he would tuck in, but that's not who Balde is at all. Like, Balde has been, again, a very good defender based on what his skill set was at the lower divisions, and maybe now using his body and physicality and speed, and he has really good timing too. I think people kind of underestimate that about Balde's defensive abilities. But I do push back a little bit on the base thing, because I think that Gavi and Pedri and Gundogan, like, I mean, who he was at Borussia Dortmund and who he was at Man City, is a player who actually does receive the ball really well in tight spaces and retains the ball in that, we'll say, that second phase of play, which is receiving the ball on the turn and turning with it. Him, Pedri, and Gavi, I think, are all really good at that. And to that point, like, people say, why with De Jong out is everything crumbling? Like, why is it built like that? And I think, not to discredit Romeu, but you see the limitations in the buildup of what he is. That's why yesterday, the only thing that really concerned me wasn't even the counterattacks. It was the mistakes that Barca made in the buildup that led to those counterattacks. And again, the main thing to address for Xavi is figuring out, hey, Araujo and Romeu, maybe stop passing to each other. Maybe we have to figure out a different permutation. Maybe you have Araujo. I know you don't have that in your toolbox right now, but yeah, maybe you need to hoof that ball out to the wings, and then we try to win that second ball. Because that's better than, again, having Romeu, who is not necessarily the player that Busquets was on the turn. Because that is another thing about Busquets. Those two things that he did that are completely irreplaceable is his long balls out to those diagonals were picture perfect in the path. Like, yeah, he made mistakes, but that just, the buildup, it opened up everything. And then with Busquets, he could be alone as a lone pivot on the turn, and he got caught. And defensively, sometimes when he got caught, then of course the counterattack is coming the way, and you can immediately blame a goal on Busquets. But even last season, and even doing it for Inter Miami, you're wearing the jersey, you've seen it. And he's so good on the turn of receiving with pressure on him and dealing with that pressure in a way that Romeu does it to a certain level, but questioning, does Romeu do it at Champions League level, like a Porto level, who a good team, they hadn't lost at home in 8 months. Can Romeu do it at that level? No, which again does not disparage Romeu. It's just Romeu is a backup on a good team, as opposed to a starting pivot or a superstar pivot who can deal with Champions League caliber pressure. Because again, another thing too, Romeu against Shakhtar Donetsk and Royal Antwerp, I trust him in that situation. It's, again, this was for the group. right? It was 3 points. Like that's the big picture too. Barca, we're gonna do the VAR stuff in a second, but like Barca played not as well as Porto, still won the game, still kept the clean sheet. It all worked out. So we are kind of nitpicking about what needs to change, but certainly yes, I think dropping either Gabi or Gundogan is part of it. But to me, it's actually about survival more than anything else. Like Pedri, he's got to get fit because I agree with you. I would love to see Gabi dropping in deeper as well. I think he's been so impressive to me this year. He's been Barca's best midfielder. And I would argue Koundé and Gabi. I was thinking about this yesterday with Koundé. Koundé and Gabi have been Barca's two best players this season. I can't really think of like a third. Maybe Ferran Torres with the timeliness of the goals she scored, but Lewandowski's also scored some goals. But we also know that they've kind of struggled in their own ways in certain matches. So to me, it's Koundé and it's Gabi. They've been head and shoulders above everyone else. And I have trusted Gabi so far now this year. If he wants to drop in deeper, great. And Pedri coming back will allow him to do that. You rotate Gundogan every now and again. Or you have Gundogan be the pivot, and then you rotate Romeo out the way that it was for the last two matches prior to that. So I do think that there are ways to solve some of these problems until Frankie de Jong gets back. And I think, again, what you saw in those 2 5-0s, like Real Betis, it's not a throwaway game. Like you saw the best version of Barcelona and what that can look like, and you need Frankie de Jong to be healthy. And it would really help if Pedri was healthy too.
No, I agree. And the thing with Oriol Romeo is I'm not mad because we knew what he was and what we were getting. We're not expecting him to be Sergio Busquets or anything like that. He's a patch until we're able to find a suitable defensive midfielder when we get enough money. Exactly. So
he's 3.5 mil. If he was Moises Caicedo for Chelsea and he had that performance yesterday at 160 mil.
Exactly. So and to me, this is, I'm not mad at him because this is what I expected of him. And then I had a hunch that he wasn't going to be good enough for the big games. And it's, against Porto, we kind of got like affirmation of that. And I think during the big games, when everybody's healthy, of course, we're going to see a mix of Frenkie and Gundogan in that defensive midfielder role. And then, so I'm not mad at it. I just want to make that clear. And with Gabi, I'm talking about right now. I've never loved Gabi up top. Like right now, maybe he'll be able to get better at that for me, in my opinion. But right now, I don't think he's quite there to be able to give us that extra something up top, like Pedri or even a Joao Felix in those tight spaces. That's why when he started playing a little bit.
Let me add that. Even the counterattacks for Gabi. So Gabi, so good in that rest defense, right? Like I actually prefer Gabi to be the one when Barca have a corner that Gundogan can't get past the first man, which happened like 3 or 4 times, twice of which led to counterattacks, by the way. You've got to beat that first man on the corners. Like you have to. Like bad bounces and losing those aerial duels are one thing on corners, but like if you don't beat that first man, they're off to the races with an easy sum. And that happened twice with Gundogan. So that's just my point on that. But for Gabi, I would love to have him set up in the rest defense being deeper. As you mentioned, like his runs into the box should be, I can't believe he's the one who, I would love to use Baquero. Like I wish people would do your homework. Baquero's the example, but Paulinho's the example I'm going to use because Paulinho, that is what the run that Gabi, right? Like if he's a late runner into the box, same thing with De Jong. Don't push De Jong forward, but if De Jong is the late runner into the box, that is where they're fine. But set them up deeper in that rest defense. Allow them to win those aerial duels. Or I mean, Gabi's 5 foot nothing, but anyway, like he still does. Like he still wins the duels and he still fights on the counter and picks up a lot of yellows in those ways. But I can forgive those because if you set him up to succeed when the other team is trying to clear their lines, he will get that ball back in, and he is good enough on the ball to play a ball that's going to set you up for the final pass.
And with Gundogan, I agree. Like in Dortmund and in City, like he played up top. He was able to play in tight spaces and whatnot. But in my opinion, I haven't seen that player so far show up at Barcelona yet. And whenever he's been like near the edge of the box and in tight spaces, I've seen him like that half a step slower, like turning around, decision making, and a little bit like not that great of a touch and whatnot so far. So if the Gundogan of Manchester City eventually gets here, which I hope so, then I completely agree playing him up top. But so far, I think the best he's looked, it's when he's dropped deep. And I don't know if it was against Sevilla. I think it was against Sevilla that he played as the lone defensive midfielder that Romeo got a rest. Mm-hmm. I think it was against Sevilla. Whatever game he played as a lone defensive midfielder, I think he was amazing. He was able to get out of the press, turn it around quickly. I loved him in that role. So that's what I'm trying to get at. That right now, the first week of October, so far from what we've seen this season, I think we have a lot of players that are either really good or that's their role, playing near the base, and we don't have that many players that are able to have that magic touch or like take the bunny out of the hat and things like.
This next week could be really telling. That game against Granada with Fermin Lopez could be really telling. I think he's got really good ball retention, and he's just an attacking midfielder. And again, Pedri being out was the other thing. That is the other attacking midfielder. That's the other high interior you have in your system, and Fermin Lopez doing his best at that.
Like for me against Sevilla, I just want to have make that clear because I didn't talk about that game on your podcast, but I was completely in awe of Fermin Lopez's game against Sevilla. Everything that he did was amazing. First touch, how quickly he turned around, how quickly he knew when to pass sideways, how quickly he knew when to take the ball forward. He was simply amazing. And if we are able to get that Fermin Lopez until Pedri eventually returns, then obviously that's going to make a ton of difference. So I just want to make that clear that that performance was, to me, insane in a good way. That he was just simply amazing against Sevilla.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I hope to see a big game from him against Granada, and we'll see against Shakhtar Donetsk too. Again, very much like Lamine Yamal, we kind of know how far can you push it, but for me, Lopez is a 20-year-old, and you're not really sure how far you can push it. So I'd love to continue to push those boundaries on what he can provide for you. All right, this is gonna be a shorter show because I did pretty long 5 headlines yesterday. Didn't have a great day today. So final thing for you is about VAR, because I gave my verdict yesterday. I was astounded on that handball that there was enough to overturn it. I just figured because he called penalty, it would just be a penalty. But they said that it was enough on the Porto player's arm, Eusebio, to overturn that, which is, I guess, by letter of the law. That's where his arm was. That's where the ball was. They have the angle, and so they overturn it. It's the first half Koundé contact on Taremi when he grabbed the shirt and came through with the tie, with his thigh, came through his leg. How is that not called a penalty? That one was one that I don't know how that one was.
God, it wasn't, because to me that was 100% a penalty. And This is why we never understand anything. And I'm not even talking about VAR. It's just about this will never get fixed. And people, oh, VAR this, VAR that. VAR, in my opinion, it was made for black and white plays, meaning offside. There's no, oh, maybe he's offside. Obviously, if you get it wrong, like the Liverpool-Tottenham game, then yeah, that thing can happen. Or if you align the lines in an incorrect way, then yes, that's an error. But if you align the lines in how they're supposed to, you're either off or you're on. There's no debate. That's it. So for me, VAR is great for these black and white plays. But handballs, we're never gonna know because they keep changing what is a handball, what isn't. Is this in a natural position? Did it touch only the shoulder? Did it eventually touch the biceps? I don't know, because there's frames where Eustáquio, it looks like the ball just hit his shoulder. Yeah. And then you see another frame and it looks like after that it hit his bicep, and his bicep that's a handball. If the ball touches your bicep, that's a handball. That's not part of your shoulder. That's more forward. So to me, I agree with the Taremi one. Even again, how many times do we see shirt pulls and some get called, some don't get called? So that's why people get annoyed when it goes against their team or it doesn't, because we never know.
It's even from league to league and referee to referee. The stat for Casemiro, I don't have it pulled up, but Kool-Aid's obviously. People listening to this one, they're going to love this one. Yeah, the fact that he got more red cards already with Manchester United than he did in all of his years with Real Madrid. Like already it's been like a year and a half, and it was like 6 years of Real Madrid, and he's already broken that because the Premier League is like, why are you doing that? Like you can't go in like that. You can't pull the shirt like that, Casemiro.
Even Sergio Ramos, like the Sevilla game, he was saying that, oh, it's clear now that some teams like don't have the same power against like the same stature. I was like, well, you know what you're implying, right?
Sure.
It's like, well, we know he's not the brightest cookie in the jar, but that's why I like with VAR. I love VAR, like the whole concept of it. But we need to remind ourselves that VAR is operated by human beings. Well, so VAR isn't the one that like people, oh, VAR this, VAR that. No, the humans that are controlling VAR are the ones that then in these like they're not objective, they're subjective, because a handball, a foul, like for me, this would be enough to be a foul. For you, it might not be enough. So at the end of the day, I think the Koundé one, first of all, the shirt pull. And if you don't think that was enough, then he just smashed his knee in Taremi's southern region. So to me, we got away with that one. The second one, obviously Cancelo got lucky because that was a handball by Cancelo. So if Eustaquio's hadn't been considered a handball, then it would have been a handball by Cancelo. But I think we don't know for sure because there's one frame that it looks like it just hit him on the shoulder, and then there's other frames that it looks like on top of hitting him in the shoulder, it also touched his bicep, which is handball. So to me, I was surprised because I thought they were just going to call a penalty. I was expecting the worst, so I was pleasantly surprised. But it was 1 year ago yesterday, Inter Barcelona, and that Dumfries handball that wasn't called. So we're here a year later with it's insane. The second game or the third game. I mean, this is the second game. I think the game against Inter was the third game of the group stage. But we're sitting here a year later, exactly a year later after that happened. That call didn't go away our way, and basically that was the snow effect, the avalanche of us getting knocked out again in the group stage, and now a 50-50 call did go our way. And I don't think, sadly, this will ever get fixed with handballs.
Well, it's like what are we trying to fix is the question. Not to get all like zany abstract on you, but what are we trying to fix? I think we're trying to actually fix the communication to the fans. Like right at the end of the day, this is a game that is entertainment, and the real money in this sport is in the broadcast, is in like this being put on for people and for fans, and fans having an understanding of what's happening. So to me, as I've always said, like I'm okay with referees making mistakes. I'm okay with VAR even making a mistake. Like I can live with a mistake by VAR. I know it's meant to be perfect, but it's not. Like I'm okay with them not having the right angle, or not even not right angle, but like not being able to make a concrete decision or not be able to overturn it, or like by the letter of the law, there is gray area in all of these different rulings. And I'm totally fine with that. But what I would love, and this is a free little tip for UEFA, but I will want royalties on this. So I would put like a referee producer, like you and I have been behind the scenes. I would put, no joke, like a referee producer in the VAR booth with them, because they can hear and communicate with the referee for everything. So I would find a way on broadcast, whether it finally gets up to the booth or it's like a little ticker on the bottom even, right? Like you throw a little graphic on and somebody's there you put a graphic guy next to him, like, and then they write it up real quick about what the final ruling was, just so everyone is on the same page. Even if you disagree with it, right? Like you can disagree with the ref, like, and I've done that before. You could disagree with VAR even, like, but also they made that choice. You have to live with that choice. But what was that choice? And I think the communication to broadcast to fans, and sometimes they do it better in stadium than they do even on television, like when we're watching at home. So I think a better communication with fans at home and in the stadiums as to what the ruling was. Like, you don't have to defend your ruling. You know what I'm saying?
We were having, well, not we in this podcast, but on Twitter or now X, this whole handball discussion less than a week ago, Real Madrid Girona, Jude Bellingham. People, before the game was still 0-0, and Bellingham, in my opinion, throws his left arm completely and blocks a shot. that wasn't called a penalty because they were saying that that was his standing arm, which in my opinion it wasn't, because his right arm already had a grasp of the ground.
You have
So
to, did we hear that? Like, did we learn that? Like, I'm saying, like, do we know from the referee that, like, we heard that from the report afterward? But I'm saying it's like in live time as you're watching that broadcast.
No, exactly that. Exactly. That's why I'm using your example, like what you said, and using another example because I completely agree. We never knew, and then there was this whole all-out war on Twitter between Barcelona and Madrid fans, both of them trying to justify whether they thought it was a handball or it wasn't. And during the broadcast, we never knew exactly what exactly you said. Why did the ref not give that as a penalty? We may agree or we may not agree, but we never heard from his mouth what that wasn't a penalty because Jude Bellingham's right arm, left arm, this and that. We never knew. So we were just literally just battling Barcelona fans and Madrid fans on Twitter, trying to justify, though, according to this rule or according to this play 3 weeks ago and whatnot. And then we don't have that, sadly. And this is not like NFL football, like where the referee gets grounding, roughing the passer, 85, blah, blah, blah. You may not agree, you may agree or not that was pass interference. That happens all the time. But at least you know what he called.
Yeah. I mean, and the game starts so quick, it's too hard on the head referee in the middle of the field. That's why, again, if you have VAR and you have people in the booth with like 8 monitors, like we've seen it, 8 to 10, 12 monitors. Like if you have multiple people, just put 2 more, like UEFA, instead of giving out bigger bonuses to the people in the booth, like instead of bigger and bigger bonuses, just put 2 additional people on payroll. You just pay them above the minimum and give them benefits. I'm not going to get into this, but yeah, just pay them a living wage and sit them next to, again, the VAR team for communication. Again, like a headset to them, up to the producer, up in the booth. Then again, the broadcasters could even say it, but the referees ruled, because again, the head referee, that's the difference between that and the NFL, is that the game immediately starts again if it wasn't ruled anything, right? And you're not going to stop the thing about the game that we love so much is that it keeps moving. It doesn't stop. So you got to keep it moving. But anyway, speaking of keep it moving, we've now done over an hour and 20 or whatever minutes between you and I on Porto. So that's it. That's Aldamuy Football at the Barcelona Pod for me, or at Hilton D13 on everywhere you can find me in the different locations. And anyway, so follow him, Aldamuy Football, wherever you get your stuff, especially in the Spanish content, as I always remind you. And as always, until next time, we're Podcsat.